First of all, let me apologize for being late. I had a very small part to play in the National Prayer Breakfast, so I had to choose Jesus over you guys. But that's behind us now, so we're ready to get back to work. First of all, let me just go ahead and with the areas that you're working so hard in. I've been concerned about China for a long time because we saw it coming. In fact, in Djibouti, that was the first time, it's my information anyway, in Djibouti is the first time that China actually did devote its attention to actually starting a function in a country outside its city limits, and that happened in Djibouti. Now, they're as far south in Africa as Tanzania. They're making things happen, and I mean, everywhere you go, the same thing. They said, America tells us what we need, and then China, gives them what they need. And they have also, you know, we're all committed to the IMET program. They actually, in China, as you and I discussed in my office, for the first time, they've invited 50 of the leaders showed up in China, in Beijing, out of 52 nations, talking about how close they want to be with them, and what they're trying to do is expand the IMET program that we've been so successful in into China. So anyway, that's something that is there, and I'm sure you're feeling some of the effects of that. I'd ask both of you, because it's happening also in SOUTHCOM, what are the effects right now that you're seeing from China that weren't there in just until recently? Starting with you, General Wadden.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. You know, it's interesting about Djibouti. It is the first overseas base that China has developed.
Yeah, the first one. Now, people are not aware of that this is the first base that they've established outside of their city limits.
That's correct. And, you know, it puts us in a very unique position because we have a Chinese base roughly several miles from the front gate of our location in Djibouti. So we have some interesting engagements with safety flight, weapons training on the ranges and so forth. So we have a requirement to work with them to work through some of those issues. But that said, overall on the continent, China has been there for quite some time, and they have worked at this relationship. What we try to do from the AFRICOM or DoD perspective is try to show that we are the best partner, the type of training we give them, the weapons perhaps that are sold by the United States of high quality, and try to make sure that our influence remains. It's a difficult task. You mentioned the issue of all the security chiefs into Beijing. You know, as an anecdote, I have no way to prove this, but in April of 2017, we in AFRICOM invited all the chiefs of defense to Stuttgart for a conference, and we had about 40 or so turn up. I believe the Chinese read our playbook, and I believe after that particular engagement, they saw it, and they wanted to make sure that they were on the same playing field as we were. But moreover, I would say that in addition to the Chinese defense, or the defense group, in September of this year, China had a forum for cooperation between China and Africa, where over 50 of the heads of state of Africa went to Beijing, and where President Xi rolled out $60 billion or so of loans and grants and programs. So the Chinese work at the relationship, and that's one of the things that we try to combat in AFRICOM by just being good partners.
Yeah, it's been my experience in the continent that China never comes in unless there's something they can gain from it. And of course, they use their own labor, and they're not doing that much of a benefit. But nonetheless, they have resources. I can't figure out where it all comes from, but much more than we seem to. And the same thing, you don't hear so much in SOUTHCOM about the activity of China. Just real briefly, what are your thoughts on that?
Senator, in SOUTHCOM, they're invested in over 56 ports. I recently returned from a trip to Central America, and my small team, the entire hotel floor right below ours, was completely booked by Chinese. They're offering schools, all expense paid, 13 days for a half-day school, no strings attached, and cash for the countries to do what they want. Again, so they're there, and they're there in force, and they have a long-term vision economically and militarily. Our best counter is education and being there. The IMET program is huge for our partners. They want to come to the United States. They want to go to our schools. Our schools remain the world's best, and it's something to emulate.
Yeah. This is my own opinion, but I think some of here agrees with this. Of all the comms that we have, AFRICOM and SOUTHCOM are the two that are the most under-resourced. And I'd like to have you be very blunt on, just very briefly, Do you agree with that? And what do we need to do to correct it?
Senator Inhofe, I do agree that we're under-resourced. However, we do make the best and the most of what we have.
I know that.
Certainly with reconnaissance assets, ISR assets, medevac assets, and also non-episodic, but where we could count on.
Of those you just named, which are the least resourced right now? ISR?
As any COCOM would say here, we would prefer more ISR for our counter-VEO fight.
Yeah, yeah. Do you agree with that, Admiral?
I would agree with that. We could also use some naval assets as well, Senator. I know our Navy needs a bigger Navy. We need some of that.
I understand that you're doing great work. Senator Reed.